EduTech Guys Radio, radio.edutechguys.com.
The opinions expressed on the site and its programs are those of participants and not intended to and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any specific educational entity, sponsor, company, state, or government agency.
Hello and welcome to EduTech Guys Radio, sponsored by Southwest Arkansas Education Cooperative and Hope Public Schools, both in Hope, Arkansas. And we want to give a shout out to CDWG for their sponsorship through some of the equipment that we use here on the show. Welcome to a special early live edition of EduTech Guys Radio. I'm one of your hosts, David Henderson.
And I'm Jeff Madlock.
Woohoo!
We're
Welcome
getting better
to the
at
show.
that. That's the really best part about that. In the old days, we'd all stutter through that whole thing.
Well, you know.
I'm going to say it's because Greg's gone.
I was just going to say, there's only two of us now, so.
So if Greg, you're out there listening, haha. No, we do miss Greg. He's moved up to bigger and better.
He has.
things.
He's doing well up north.
Up north. Yeah, about an hour away.
North for us.
We Southern folk.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, thanks for listening. If you want to check us out on the web, go to www.edutechguys.com. You can drop down to the bottom of the page, find a contact form there. Also, there's a podcasting list there. You can jump ahead and see any of our other 43 shows or conference shows that we have had.
Yeah.
Also, catch us on iTunes. Just look up EduTech Guys. In fact, as David said a few shows back, if you'll just go to Google and type in EduTech Guys, pretty sure we're the number one. We take pride in that.
Yes.
We're the number one return.
We're working hard to be those
analytics are working
EduTech
beautiful. I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? We're the EduTech.
So far, I think it's good. We'll see what happens.
So you can catch us on Twitter at EduTech Guys. You can catch us on Facebook /EduTech Guys. Instagram /EduTech Guys. Guess what? Pretty much look at anything, just put EduTech Guys in there and you'll find us. Hey, if you're listening to the show and you'd like to chime in and find out what's going on, just hit hashtag ETGChat. And we'll be monitoring that on the good old TweetDeck.
Yeah.
Give TweetDeck a shout out there. If you're not using TweetDeck, that's a great way to keep up with your social media, especially if you're using it in the classroom, keeping up with the kids. Hey, we have a very great show today. This is show number 44. We're coming to the end of season 1. It's funny, I guess our season is unlike, our season is 1 year. So Dave and I are pretty proud of ourselves, considering conference shows and our regular weekly shows. We've done almost a show a week for a whole year. That's pretty good.
It's been awesome.
I'm pretty happy with ourselves. But today is a great show. We have Will Richardson on the show. He was one of our first guests.
Yeah.
He came in from ISTE last year. That's when we were just fledgling, broadcasters in the podcast field. And we're excited to have him here today. He'll be on in just a bit, and we're going to talk about his new book, Freedom to Learn. And probably talk about his previous book. But either way.
And whatever else he wants to talk about.
He's the guest. So
that's right.
But yeah, it's going to be a great day. We'll hit the Google Tip of the Week, and we'll also talk about what's happening right now with everybody. End of school.
Hey, end of school.
Which means professional development time.
Yep.
And if you're looking for some fun professional development, check out our website. We are doing podcasting professional development throughout the summer.
Yeah,
we do have some slots open, so if you're listening to the broadcast and it sounds like fun to you, let the powers that be at your site or your school or your cooperative or your educational service center know about it. They can get in touch with us, and we'd love to come and talk to you about how to do podcasting, how to use Google Apps to get it all done. And it's going to be fun talking to Will Richardson about this, because that's what, we're going to talk about where schools are going and what we have to do. And, it's kind of where we are. That's the way we believe. Let's broaden it and all that good stuff. So I tell you what, Will, are you there?
I am.
Awesome. Cool. Always have to check,
Well,
we truly believe in technology, but you got to check it.
That's right.
Hey, Will, welcome to the show. We'll let you introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for having me again, Jeff, and really appreciate it. Congratulations on almost a year of doing podcasts. That's always fun, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
I am a parent, an educator, a blogger, author, speaker. Been doing this actually 10 years this week after I left my high school job of 22 years.
Wow. Well, congratulations on 10 years. That's awesome.
Thanks very much. It's been kind of a wild ride, but lots of fun. And just out here now trying to engage people in a different conversation around education, really trying to push their thinking a little bit about how we've got to change the way we think about the world in our schools because of what's happening outside of schools. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, last time we talked about from master teacher to master learner, and since then I've read the book, and I'd started it back last time. But your new book, I have started it, but I have not finished it. I apologize. It's into school, so we're all just running around hectic trying to get everything done. But your train of thought just moves forward and forward and forward. I can tell that that's where Freedom to Learn came from. So tell us about where you're at right now with Freedom to Learn. Tell us, what made you write that book and what pushed you from your last book to this book.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think in a lot of ways, this is more going backwards than it is forwards. I know that for the first good portion of the time that I started blogging and started, going out and speaking, probably first 7-8 years, in fact, I was more focused on tools and how to. I've just started doing a lot of reading about learning and going back to Dewey and to Papert and to a whole bunch of people who I know I probably read in college, but didn't really resonate at the time.
Sure.
And really, when I'm talking about freedom to learn, I'm talking about just very basic beliefs that we have around how kids learn best, and those have been around forever. I think those are pretty much eternal. There are things like, giving kids opportunities to pursue their passions and helping kids to really create good work in the world, to solve real problems that interest them, to ask questions that interest them. All those things that we know are the kind of conditions for good learning. I think we have to try really hard to create more of those in classrooms. And so that's really not new. That's old, right? Yeah. What is new is then if you use that as a starting point, how technology can amplify those opportunities. Because now, obviously, with the web and with all the access that we have, it's pretty easy for us to connect with other people, to obviously consume all sorts of content, to create content and share it. And so if you have a literacy around it, and if you have the dispositions to really be a learner in the traditional sense, then it's a pretty interesting time. But the challenge is that for most schools, freedom and agency over learning is not something that they necessarily want to provide to kids. We want to control it as much as we can, and we want to be basically still, I think, the people who deliver an education to kids, not help them develop as learners around the things that they really care about.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I think
absolutely.
that hit the exact point. That's and I think it's interesting that you're right. The thing that's changed that's major is the web, is the communication instantaneous.
Yeah.
And I think one of your premises that I think I picked from this, doing my brief reading, when the kids come to school, it is like everything that they were doing between 4:00 the previous day and when they came to school, it's kind of like we go, now shut all that down and do what I say. And they're losing that opportunity to take whatever happened to them that past 12 to 16 hours and not continue with it, because you're right, we're trying to structure everything. I think that puts us in a really interesting place, that we're trying to, just traditionally, our structure of schooling does not meet the 21st century needs of learners at all. I mean, it's just terrible. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and something that I say a lot both in my writing and my presentations is that, schools weren't really built for this moment, right? Schools were built for this idea that if you wanted to learn something, you had to go to that particular classroom with that particular teacher for this particular time with these particular kids to go through this particular curriculum. I mean, we're the ones that organized all of it, because we operate under the assumption that if you don't get the Pythagorean theorem in 7th grade, you may never get it again. You never have an opportunity to access it. Well, that whole premise is kind of out of the window now. The Pythagorean theorem is everywhere. And so the question for us becomes, how do we begin to shift our work so that we can help kids flourish in a world where they can learn on their own, where they can learn pretty much anything they want when they want it. Now, that's not to say that teachers don't have a role in that, and that there aren't really valuable and important relationships between kids and adults in schools that we want to sustain. But it does mean that the role of teacher is going to change. It does mean that the way we think about an education is going to have to change. And I think, to be honest with you, I think a lot of people now are beginning to ask those types of questions and really start to grapple with that.
I think you're right. And well, it's interesting. Just a few episodes back, David's daughter's school is moving to a flex mod scheduling,
Right.
trying to adjust to fix this kind of issue. You know, and we see it. It's not a big school district, 1,200 kids, but it's the high school moving to a flex mod schedule so that they can try to work around the way the kids are learning and not the way they're trying to teach. And I see a lot of schools doing that.
Well, I think that, just really fast, the one kind of the bar I set for any kind of technological innovation or any kind of shift in architecture in schools, in terms of schedule or any of that stuff. I mean, the one question I always ask is, how does this create more agency for learners to learn, right? How are we, by using this particular tool or creating this particular condition, how are we giving more agency to the learner? And I think all too often that's not something that we ask.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with that. And I think the other thing is that I don't know if we actually ask what we want the outcomes to be for students. What are we trying to make them pass the test and go to college? Is that and not where are you going to actually take this? And then maybe that's one of the concepts that's a hard part for us. I think most schools at this point in the U.S. with PARCC testing, the testing, that's pretty much their only thing. I've got to have math scores at this level and I have to have literacy scores at this level. And we've forgotten the whole idea that this kid loves to blog and he's a great artist. And how can we tie all this into that for that student? I can see that. I agree.
And it's a hard narrative to change too, because it's this narrative the parents were a part of, and policymakers are sustaining that narrative too. So it's very, very difficult right now.
Well, and that's one of the things that I was going to bring up. We just had, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, the principal of the high school called in all the parents about this change that was coming and what it's going to look like and what it's going to mean. And man, the parental, I hate to use the word backlash because there was backlash, but from my perspective, it's more misinformation and misunderstanding of what the district is trying to do for those students. So where before, everything is, you're in this period at this time each day and things are going to get shuffled around and moved around, and the students are actually going to be more in charge of their own learning for the most part. And we're really getting into that, the flipped environment, for lack of a better description, but essentially where teachers are becoming facilitators for the students learning what it is they want to learn, but also what they need to learn. I mean, you still have requirements of what's expected students to learn during the time they're in school. But man, some of the parents were just flipped out, and it goes right to what you said. It's a complete change from the way we did it in my day or the way we grew up. And it's a hard thing to do. It really is. It's a hard thing to get folks to change that mindset.
I don't think schools, and to be honest, I don't think most leaders understand how long it takes to make change that is sustainable. And I think that story that you tell is really kind of indicative of a lot of places that I go where, they haven't taken the time to build the capacity in parents to have a different conversation around the changes that they're making. Mm-hmm. And so, the districts that I'm working with, we're like on a 5, 7, 10-year plan. And part of the beginning of that is to simply build the capacity of parents, community members, teachers, everybody to engage then in a relevant conversation around change that is sustainable. Because I'm sure you've noticed most initiatives that move districts or move classrooms to a different place, within 5 years have been reeled back in, right? That we go and we start doing this, but then all of a sudden we kind of trickle back to what we were doing before. And I think that the system in and of itself is very self-preserving. So in order for it to significantly change over the long term, you have to invest a lot of time at the outset to just kind of bring people up to speed as to what the contexts are, go back and talk really about learning. I mean, we start with the question, what do you believe about how kids learn? And most people, when they answer that question and then compare it to what they do in the classroom, the two totally, they don't connect at all.
Exactly.
Right? We're doing a whole bunch of stuff in classrooms that we don't really believe create learning conditions. So, you got to start there, but it's a long conversation.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I just shared a quote yesterday from Bill Gates that most people overestimate what they can do in a year and they underestimate what they can do in a decade. So, I think that's the hardest part, is because the silver bullet is the way that schools work right now. They need it done in 190 days. They need it done in 80 days.
Well, I will tell you, one of the things that you hit the nail on the head, and I'll be honest, 5 years that's pretty gracious of you. I mean, really, because usually it's about 2 to 3, and then everybody's backpedaling and changing, or it's not even backpedaling so much. It's just, well, we're going to do this for 2 years and try it, and nope, let's change this, and kind of like Jeff said, sort of the silver bullet, sort of the way the wind changes, kind of things. And I will tell you, that was one of the concerns that the parents brought up themselves. They said, how do we know that in 2 years this isn't all going to just fly away, and now you've absolutely destroyed my students' education because you feel like playing around with this new system?
Well, and again, that's because we haven't invested the time in helping them understand why we're doing this, and the broader contexts that are requiring us to change, and why this is a long-term type of thing. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why it doesn't work. Certainly, leadership changes on a regular basis. I mean, I think the average tenure of superintendents these days is under 3 years or something like that. So that doesn't help, obviously. But I'll tell you that the biggest thing is I think very few districts have taken the time to simply articulate their principles around what they believe about learning. And if they don't have those, if that's not where you're starting from, most of the change that you implement is going to be fleeting. I can just tell you that, because it's going to go back to what's comfortable, what's more traditional. It's going to remain a teaching culture rather than a learning culture. Mm-hmm. And, that's going to inhibit that freedom that I'm talking about. It's going to reduce the freedom the kids have to choose and to, again, learn how to be learners in the context of stuff that they care about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that in that approach, do you think that that's one of the big disconnects is forget the parents at this point, starting with a school district and its staff and its administration, is the disconnect of letting the students be the learners, defining what they want to learn. And
yeah.
And then the scary part, I think, now is that, I mean, you would probably agree, is that we have the technology, the kids have the technology in their hands to define their learning.
Right.
Yeah. And is that, so
right.
The bulk of what you're dealing with the schools you're working with, is the bulk of that is just changing the mind think of that, isn't it?
But it's a huge shift, right? I've got a post coming out tomorrow morning where, or maybe it's, I don't know, soon, where, I write about how I really don't want my kids to be educated mm-hmm. by schools. I want them to be learners mm-hmm. in schools. The idea of an education, while I understand the concept of it, obviously, and I'm not saying I don't really want my kids to be educated, but I think that the focus in schools can't be on an education any longer, because an education is changing all the time. And so on graduation day, we hand out diplomas and we say, yeah, you are educated, right? And all of a sudden it becomes past tense, mm-hmm. As if you've checked a box or now you're ready. And we all know kids are not ready on graduation day to flourish in the world. The only way they're going to be ready is if they are learners, if they are really powerful, invested, engaged learners who can basically take on the task now. And this wasn't the case 10, 15, years ago, but now their task is to educate themselves for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And that's their job now. It's not our job. It's not anyone else's job. Yet we are basically enabling them in their time in school to wait for other people to educate them. Yes. And that's just a huge disconnect right now. And the focus has to move away, I think, from the whole idea of educating kids to creating learners. So it's developing them, nurturing, those learning dispositions, and really getting them to love learning and to go out and want to learn more once they leave us.
Yeah, I have several case studies in my career over 23 years of students who were not great students, but they were great learners. And they left high school and immediately moved on with their lives into the direction that they were doing, that they were learning. Right. And it's interesting to look at that because I have several of them that, do things in every genre you could think of. And, they made D's and F's in chemistry, and they didn't get, trigonometry, but they're already powerhouses in some of the fields that they work in now because they were allowed to be smart enough. Well, they were independent enough to be learners on their own, no matter what the core curriculum was. They were going to move forward and push hard. And I can see what's interesting is that there are a lot of parents out there who can't understand that. There's a lot of parents who know you have to. We were all trained. I think back to Seth Godin's TED Talk where he's talking about the reason that we have schools is to train factory workers. Kind of true, and it is true. But that's what's interesting is most parents say, well, you have to take trigonometry because you have to pay your dues. You've got to do these things to move forward. But that's just not work. It never worked. It never worked. And I mean, Will, you're one of few people who's actually hollering that from the mountains at this point again. Yeah, and you're right. It's when you said that, I can think back. It's not a new concept, but you're actually kind of trying to help them push into it. And schools, how are the schools biting at that? Are you getting a lot of hits on your line?
Oh well, the I don't know if it's ironic or what the word is, but whenever I talk about that kind of stuff, whenever we're having discussions about this stuff, everybody in the room, their heads are nodding. You're absolutely right. Yeah, this is the way we learn. This is the way. This is But then the actual changing of the practice is where it gets really difficult for people, and I totally understand it. I mean, because it really has to be almost intrinsic on the part of the educator to change it. There are very few extrinsic motivations for moving to a more learner-centered, a place where kids are really, again, asking interesting questions and pursuing those questions where the teacher's helping them understand not just how to answer them, but how to really go about answering them, the process of learning around that stuff. So that's where it gets hard. But I've been struck in the last 2 years since I've kind of honed in on this. Like I said, it took me a while to kind of get to this point. But once by the way, once I got to this point, of course, I read hundreds of people who've already been there, for a long time, right? And here I thought thinking about it so differently, and everybody knows this stuff.
It's like buying a new car. Then you go, I never saw this car till I bought one. Yeah, I see it everywhere. Yeah,
exactly. But it is really striking to me how no one pushes back when we talk about how kids learn and how different it looks from what happens in classrooms. Everybody just kind of nods their head in agreement. Everybody knows it. Everybody kind of just admits it. And yet it's extremely difficult to change it. It's just very hard. So, my kind of standard line now to make people feel really bad is, well, just look, if you're not going to do what you believe good learning requires in classrooms, then at least just own it. At least just own it that you're not doing it. Because you got to feel a little bit of guilt if you're looking at the world and saying, what's happening in my classroom is not conducive to kids learning powerfully and deeply, and I know it, but I can't change it. So it's almost like, the first step to change is to admit you have a problem.
Right. That's exactly what was going through my head. Let's admit that we have this problem. Let's admit that we're not creating great learning environments for kids, that we haven't been doing that for 125 years.
But now that the world has shifted, we really have to think about how to do that, because those great learning environments now exist writ large outside of the classroom, with kids carrying around their own technologies and learning on their own in ways, again, that look nothing like what they're doing in schools.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find a lot of schools saying, "Will, we need a step-by-step outline to accomplish this," because that's the way they think?
Yeah, and I mean, look, I do think that there is a process that you can build around this, but it's not a step-by-step thing, right? It's not a recipe.
Right.
But I do think that there's look, like I said before, I think I'll give it to you. I think there's 4 steps to this. I think number 1 is it's the individual educator building his or her own capacity to understand what's happening in the world right now. That you have to think about what you believe, and then you have to look at the contexts of the world, and you have to have that kind of internal dialogue or whatever with yourself as to, is what I'm doing now in my classroom really relevant and sustainable for kids who are going to go out into this very different world? So I think if all of us took the time to just, and with the support, by the way, of leadership and, book study and whatever else, just conversations within the school, just so the educators kind of get up to speed on everything that's going on. And then I think we need to take some time to build the capacity of parents and community members and all those other people, so that at some point we can sit down and create a really modern vision for teaching and learning. That's the other thing that kind of has really surprised me, is every school I go to, I ask them, so what's the vision for teaching and learning in this district? And either no one knows what it is, they can't recite it, or they take out their phones and they start going to the website because they know it's on the website somewhere.
Exactly.
I got to be able to Google this, right?
Meaningless words. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to anybody. They're not living their mission. They're not living their vision for the most part. So that's the 3rd step. And then the 4th step is only then, is when you begin to really design and to do things differently and to iterate and to pilot and to, do all that kind of work, which is why I think it takes 5-7 years. You got to take the time to get everybody understanding the world so they can have a relevant conversation about it. You got to build a vision that says, this is what we think is going to be best for kids. And then we got to figure out how to do that. It's not something that is going to be the same cookie cutter approach school to school. This is what's going to work for our kids, for our staff, whatever else. So, I do. I think there's a process. And that comes from, by the way, talking to and looking at and reading about many, many districts over the last 5-7 years who have done that work, who have begun to move in those directions. Albemarle, for instance, Pam Moran in Virginia is a great example of that. CCSE SD59, Ben Gray in Illinois is a great example of that. So there are schools who have, it's not a step-by-step thing, but there is a general process that they're going through in order to move to a place where sustainable change really happens.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and going back to the community involvement in getting community and parents, but getting community parents to I don't want to say buy in, because I don't think that's really what we're looking for. I mean, I know that's part of it, but to me, it's helping with that process. And I know from my personal experience with the school that my daughter goes to, and the where, like I said, they had a parent. The principal had a parent meeting where she invited all the parents in, and there was some conversation, but it was more just Q&A, and I'm curious. In your experience mainly, as far as that community step, do you see that as well? Like, where it's hard to get the community to actually have dialogue versus kind of that us versus them, reactionary. This is how it's going to be. We shall go forth, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so 2 quick points on that. So when you said buy-in, right? I agree with you. I'm not sure it's buy-in. I think if we do our jobs well, parents will demand the change that we want, right? Mm-hmm. If we have built the capacity to the point where parents are seeing the world differently, they understand that the future of work is changing. They understand that higher ed is a mess right now. They understand that, all of these different technologies are impacting on the way we can learn. I think parents would be like, we need to change. Let's go. Let's move it in a really different direction.
Right.
But the second piece of that is, again, it's about capacity building. So one of my favorite superintendents, Lisa Brady, who's in a district in Westchester County in New York, over the course of 3-4 years now, she's been going through a process basically to try to move the district to a different place. And what she's done is had book studies with parents. She has had, ongoing meetings and discussions. She's shown the video Most Likely to Succeed, the movie. She's constantly getting in front of her parents with a different script, a different narrative. And then, answering the questions that parents have, to the point now where parents are expecting change. They want the district to move in a different direction because they understand it now. But, if parents are just coming in and saying, well, we don't want it to change. It was good enough for me. It should be good enough for my kid.
Right.
Then to be honest, and with no disrespect, but we haven't done our job because we haven't educated parents to the point where they are ready to have a conversation that's really different. Just trying to make it better.
Right. Exactly. And I would agree. Again, not trying to throw anybody under the bus or point fingers or anything, but in my particular experience, that seems to be sort of the case with this as well. And so I think that's one of the things that I'd like to do is go back to that principle and just say, hey, okay, we had this kind of first initial meeting. What are some of those? What are ways that we can help? Those of us who are parents who get it and are excited and can't wait for this to happen, what are the things that we can do to help the school build that community involvement, build that really, like you said, getting the other parents to see the light and then suddenly demand, I say suddenly, but you know what I mean, demand that our students' way of learning change to meet where they are and where they're headed. So
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Post-secondary, have you had any interest? That to me, that is one of our failure weak points. That's a weak point in armor because our kids leave us from getting an education from us, and then they go on to post-secondary. And for 2 years there, for sure, they're not doing anything in education. They're definitely probably not reading and keeping up with what's happening in the field of education. And by the time they hit their junior or senior year and get into their teaching classes, and before they do their student teaching, that's where they're learning to load the projector and learn how the copier works. I'm being obnoxious, aren't I? But are you seeing any of the post-secondary schools in this country start to lean this way and understand that, we've got to start changing the entire way that we look at education, in air quotes there?
You mean for pre-service programs?
Yeah.
Service? Not very much at all.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd like to just expand that. Have you seen that at all in any program? I don't care what the major field of choice is.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a couple schools who have been willing to offer courses that are a little bit more about these types of things that we're talking about, where they really are looking at learning theory in a different way, and it's more about learning than teaching and understanding how to build a learning culture and how to use this. Rare. I mean, it's an outlier. Most pre-service programs are still all about classroom management, teaching to the curriculum, whatever, doing lesson plans. I mean, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of a very 20th century, 19th century approach that, I agree. I don't think that it's helping our kids. I'm not saying those people aren't great people and that they can't be really good influences on kids' lives. But again, when it comes to a different vision for teaching and learning, that's not supporting it. And even those teachers who are coming out of pre-service programs with a lot of kind of technological or network learning in their own personal lives, they're not really willing to begin to do that kind of stuff in classrooms because they want to keep their jobs, and they're in many cases when they're being evaluated, a lot of their supervisors are saying things like, yeah, well, you don't want to do that. Let's just stick to the script here and let's just make sure the kids get to this outcome, get to this standard, get to this test result or whatever else.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And they really aren't very supportive of different, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. I'm curious, looking at the shift that is happening, granted slowly but surely, in K-12, especially high school 9-12, in the change in approaches to student learning. And then you have students who are very interested in pursuing particular professions that require them to further their education. And then they step into this, university environment, which really is, taking a step back into this very, rigid, structured environment and way of being educated, as you referred to earlier. I'm curious if and I don't know if you know or not, this is just kind of a blanket curiosity. I'm curious, it would be interesting to see how those students fare compared to that open learning environment going into the closed university environment, assuming that's the environment they end up in. As you mentioned, some universities are expanding that, so maybe they find a university that fits them better. But I'm just kind of curious what the ultimate outcome, of that ends up being in terms of their actual receipt of whatever advanced degree they're looking for, or whatever field they end up going into, those kinds of things. And it may be too soon for that kind of data, but I think that'd be something very interesting to be tracking.
I think the interesting conversation around higher ed right now, and the New York Times editorial board just came out with an editorial yesterday that said basically that colleges are not fulfilling their contract with kids because basically so many kids are coming out of college without jobs, unable to get jobs, basically without the skills that they need. There's a huge skills gap because, again, higher ed hasn't shifted very much, hasn't really figured out what this kind of new modern workplace or modern environment requires. But, the other thing is, too, for higher ed, I don't know what it's like in Arkansas, but in most places that I go, higher ed is under huge budgetary duress right now. Most small to medium schools, liberal arts schools are hurting really badly, cutting staff, cutting programs. A lot of them, some of them are going under. And you continue to read stories about kids who are coming out of colleges with huge amounts of debt, without basically, I think there was a study too that said a couple of weeks ago, the White House said that in 10 years, all jobs that pay $20 or less will basically be taken over by robots and technology. Right. So, I mean, it's a very, very fast changing, fluid environment when it comes to, paying $100,000, $200,000 to get a degree that may not be relevant or enough to guarantee you, kind of a ticket to the middle class, which is what it always used to be, right? Always used to say, if you can get a degree, you're pretty much set. Well, that's just absolutely not the case any longer. And a lot of people thought, well, we had that recession in 2008, and obviously that was a really bad time. But you look at the statistics and you look at the research, those jobs aren't coming back. Those jobs are pretty much gone forever. So again, we're not having a different conversation. We're trying to do this whole thing better, and whether it's at the K through 12 level or the higher ed level, again, Russell Acuff, who, I love, says, most of society's ills are not being solved because we're trying to do the wrong thing right. And I think that's what the problem is in education. We know what we're doing isn't working, but yet we continue to make changes in an attempt to make it better. And then what Acuff would say is, just don't forget that the righter you do the wrong thing, the wronger you get, right? And so, as long as you're continuing to try to do better what is wrong, it's a huge problem. But I don't know if that made any sense. But
absolutely.
That actually does. It's interesting. I was a musician first. I was a band director for 12 years. And it's interesting. No one could teach me to play the Kusevitsky concerto. I had to teach myself. And one of the things that happened to me when I was 20 years old was that light came on, and I realized, wait, I get this. I'm taking these classes, but I'm learning on my own. I have to learn on my own. One of my best students ever went to the University of Colorado and got a degree in CBA, just because he had to get a degree to get in the door. But he's a phenomenal back-end coder, which, when he came out, the biggest part was, here's what I've done. This is what I learned on my own. And Greg, who we have Greg here, that was one of our former guys on the show, one of my former employees. Greg, what he has degree in and what he knows is a vast, massive difference. I think that talking about school culture and talking about the teacher's role and the school's role in building this culture I think we really have to look at the fact that I think that's our biggest role in this whole thing, is to help the kids understand that Snapchatting and Facebooking all day is not going to be the answer. It's part of finding the answer. It's part of finding your way in this world. But I really think that our culture in the United States has hindered us a little bit. Would you not agree that that's part of what you're talking about, is we have to help them learn to be learners in this candy store that they're walking around in, which is the internet superhighway, the information superhighway. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I ask teachers when teachers or when anyone in education begins to say that kids are distracted, kids can't stay on task, they're not focused, all that kind of stuff. I'll say to them, have you ever seen a kid working on a project that she loves in school?
That's exactly right.
You've never seen kids who are absolutely engaged and invested in doing work that they care about?
Yeah, that's a small percentage, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like that's not possible in every class. Why shouldn't that be possible in every classroom?
Right, exactly.
Why shouldn't that be our goal? To engage kids to the point where they're working on things where Facebook and Snapchat become these kinds of things that can wait, because because they and look, I go to schools all the time where that's the case. Not for 100% of the kids, you know what I'm saying, but you walk into those schools and there are cultures of learning that say to kids, look, we value what you care about. We value your passions. We know that you can do amazing things, and so let's do that stuff together, and let's figure out what it is that you really care about, so that we can, help you develop as someone who can contribute, who can create, who can, collaborate and solve problems and do all the stuff that we want kids to do. So, I get it that, I was at a big urban district just a couple days ago, and there was a long kind of monologue about how kids are using technology to just waste time and be distracted and everything else. And I was like, well, no disrespect, but if I'm sitting in one of these classrooms, I'd probably do the same thing.
Yes, exactly.
Bingo. You hit it on the head.
As a matter of fact, I already was. Oh, sorry.
I think you hit it on the head, and I think that's the scary part for administrators and building level principals, is to win over the teachers, to win over the parents, to find that way to get this across to them that here's the deal, that this is, can I make a stew that everybody likes? That's a hard part. Can I feed everybody?
Well, if we don't think that we can create conditions and opportunities in classrooms that will engage kids to the point where they put their cell phones away and work on the stuff that they're working on, then we're in really, really big trouble, right?
Yeah.
Then this whole conversation is really kind of irrelevant, because that's what freedom is. I mean, kind of coming full circle, but I mean that's kind of what we're talking about here all along.
But you're right. And if we can't create content in the classroom where the kids can use their cell phones and get the job done and be excited about doing it, then we're not providing the opportunities that we can provide either. Because there is a place and a time for every piece of social media, in my opinion. I mean, if that's what drives you, let's and that's a big thing with David and I in podcasting. Podcasting's having a great resurgence because people like to be heard. And, people like to talk, and people like to share their information and what they learn. What kid can't wait to get home? What person can't wait to tell their parents, whether you're 7, 17, 27, 47, to tell that significant other, guess what I did today?
Right.
That's a really big deal. And that's, to me, one of the biggest things about where technology is for us now is the quick availability for us to say, look what I did today. I mean, Facebook has made billions of dollars off of it. So education should too. Education should make billions of learners doing the same thing. But hey, well, I don't want to try to cut us off, but we're getting close to the end of time. We get to talking, and we love talking. So yeah, freedom to learn. I think you can get it from the website, willrichardson.com. You can actually go there, click on books at the top. Am I right, Will?
Yep,
that's books. Yep. And you can get it on Amazon. Just click the purchase button. It'll take you right to Amazon. You can get it. Highly recommend the book. If you get the opportunity to see Will this summer, Will, where are you going to be at this summer?
Well, I'm going to be at ISTE at the end of June in Denver. And then in October, I'm going to be in both Tulsa and Seattle doing 2-day workshops through Solution Tree. So if you're interested in, in spending 2 days just really going deeply into some of these conversations and thinking about long-term sustainable change, go to the Solution Tree website. You'll find all the information there. I'll have it on my website shortly as well. So those are the big ones. And then I'm here and there and everywhere. If you're in Moscow in September, maybe I'll see you there. So
that's cool.
Wow, that's cool.
Awesome.
Wow.
Invite there, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's cool. That is really
we'll
awesome.
all come over.
Yeah, we'll be there. Well, and catch you on Twitter at willrich42. Is that right?
45.
45. Thank you. Jeez, I don't get my numbers all messed up. willrich45 on Twitter, and we can also find you at willrichardson.com. Hey, awesome. Will, thank you for being on the show again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good to talk to you guys.
Yeah, man. Awesome. We hope to see you soon, and we'll invite you back. Don't worry.
That'd be great.
Thanks,
cool.
Will.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Awesome. It was great to have Will Richardson on the show. Again, a lot of good conversation. Actually, I like how we get warmed up. We could probably talk to another 20, 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour on those topics. And highly recommend checking out Will's work. It's wonderful. It's good reads. It's easy reads. It's very insightful. Get you really thinking. Maybe you need to get your district on board. Maybe get your school on board. All that good stuff. Yeah. Hey, we're going to jump out to some music real quick. Take a quick break. This is our favorite, Nick C. We always play Nick C.
you always pick Nick C., which I'm okay with,
Hey,
being
all
my
those
cousin
guys on
and
the
all,
radio,
but,
they play all the stuff all the time. I think it's one of those, Rush Limbaugh always plays, some Tower of Power or something like that. So we're not Rush Limbaugh by any means.
Holy cow. What's
yeah, that's not us. So,
anyway.
Here's Nick C. with a great song, Just Love Me.
When your eyes they gaze upon me, and your silhouette is near, all I will ask of you is to love me down, 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 with your mercy all around, and when your poetry is clear, all I will ask of you is to love me now, now, now. Oh, I love you more than words can say. Oh, I ain't throwing that word, no. Just love me, just love me, just love like you want to. Just love like only you know to. I could fade out in your love, like the summer's warm sunlight. And all I will ask of you is to hold me tight. With your gentle arms around me, like whisper winds at mine. Just have to ask of you to go all night, night, night. Oh, I love you more than words can say. Oh, I ain't throwing that away, no. Just love me, just love me, just love like you want to. Just love me, just love like only you know to. my friend. Just love me, just love me, just love like you want to. Just love me, just love like only you know too. Just love me, just love me, just love like you want to. Just love me, just love like only you know too. Yeah, baby, just love me. Just love me too. Just love me too. Just love me too. Well, ever when I'm calling out your name, will you hear me? Cause honey, I'm just vibing on your energy when you're near me. And I know we have just begun, but I'm glad that we can give it a chance. Cause ain't no better feeling out than falling in love. My heart is not my own, and it's sinking like a stone. I'm completely yours. I'm completely yours. I'm completely yours. I'm completely yours. Well, love, every time that you cross my mind, I think of bright moonlight and a glass of wine, and slow dancing on the beach to our favorite song. And if nobody's looking, we can get it on. But I know we have just begun, and I'm glad that we can give it a chance. Cause ain't no better feeling out than falling in love. My heart is like a stone. My heart is not my own. I'm completely yours. I'm completely yours. I'm completely yours. I'm completely yours. It's the diamond in your eyes when you look at me, the way my hair stands up when I hear you speak, the way my legs turn rubber when you love me down. I said, hey, little lover, can you hear me now? Well, I know we have just begun, and I'm glad that we can give it a chance. Cause ain't no better feeling out than falling in love. My heart is not my own. It's sinking like a stone. I'm completely yours. 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 I'm completely yours.
Hey, you're listening to EduTechGuys, coming to you live from the Southwest Arkansas Educational Cooperative in Hope, Arkansas. Also, I want to thank Hope Public Schools for letting us do this fun time that we do, letting me do it, come out with David.
Yeah.
That was Nick C. Two different songs, Just Love Me and Completely Yours. We like to play some music in between because it kind of gives us time to catch back up, look at our show notes, and find out what's going on for the rest of the show.
Yeah, exactly.
We get back Want to thank Will Richardson for being on the show.
Yes.
Always a great guest. Now we can say that because he's been on twice.
That's right. And he was both times.
He was both
so
times.
That's always.
So that's always. So, his book, Freedom to Learn. Take a look at it. You can catch him on willrichardson.com or on Twitter. Good follow, willrich45.
There you go. Awesome.
Hey, let's finish this bad boy up. We got a couple commercials, don't we? Tell us what's going on, David. What's up for us for the rest of the year?
What's up with us? Actually, was it 2 weeks? We're going to be at the Level Up Conference in Texarkana on June 7th. We're going to do 2 one-hour breakout sessions there, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And then the next week, here at the Education Service Center in Hope, we're going to be doing a podcasting in the classroom workshop on June 14th in the afternoon. And then the next day, in fact, we'll leave here and drive to Hot Springs. We're going to be at the HISTE conference, the Hot Springs Tech Institute conference in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And that's going to be actually at the Hot Springs High School. And that's going to be June 15th and 16th. And we're doing full 2-day conference coverage. At that conference, we're going to be talking with various presenters. We're going to be grabbing people walking by and strapping them into the chair and making them talk to us. And we'll be talking with vendors. And I'm sure we'll at some point get the host with the most, Mr. Don Benton, who's the head of the whole thing. I'm sure we'll get him in there as well. But so we're going to be live. That's June 15th and 16th from HISTE in Hot Springs. Then at the very tail end of November into December, we're going to have AESA, which we were at AESA last year in New Orleans, and this time we're going to be in Savannah, Georgia. So that's going to be very cool. And then, if that weren't enough, there's more. We actually have a phone conversation with the folks at who are heading up the FETSI conference in Orlando, and that's going to be in January 2017. So we'll have more about those future dates coming up, but just to kind of give you a heads up, lots of cool stuff coming up for EduTech Guys on the air.
Yeah, and hey, don't forget, it's into school, so check out the PD offerings from your local education service centers.
Absolutely.
And
for example,
I know it's PD time, but if you're looking for some stuff on podcasting, please have your administration, or if you're an administrator listening, just contact EduTech Guys. You can contact us at contact@edutechguys.com. Just drop us an email. You can jump to the website and hit us from there also, or you can catch us on Twitter at EduTechGuys or Facebook. EduTech Guys, or so on and so on.
Exactly.
You know the routine.
Well, and as Jeff mentioned, especially if you're an educator, but even if you're not an educator, look up your local education service agency that's nearby you. Google that. Get an idea what's near you and find out what kind of different workshops and professional development offerings they've got in the summer. I'm telling you, they cover all kinds of things. For my co-op, you can go to swaec.org and go to the professional development button right there in the middle of the page and check out all kinds of PD stuff that we've got this summer. So very cool. Very cool.
Really great stuff. So you know what time it is?
It is time for Google App of the Week. I guess it's a tip. Google Tip of the Week.
Tip of the week this week comes from our good friend, Greg Moore.
I'm a dork.
Greg Moore, our previous and still honorary forever EduTech guy.
EduTech guy.
He sent it to us, and actually, if you use Google Docs regularly, this has been popping up inside your Google Docs during the week.
It's been annoying you for a few days. For at least, maybe a week or so.
Maybe a week or so. It's the update to Google Docs Sheet slides that lets them automatically save recent files offline. So that's a great feature, actually. So if you are using the Google app on your device and you actually have it syncing as a local drive, then it'll constantly sync it offline. Now, if you're using a Chromebook, it's even better because that's what it's doing is it's actually syncing it for offline usage. So that's pretty heavy stuff. You can take it out, take a look at it. We'll tweet out the link here in just a second. But if you want to look it up, there's a lot of good stuff out there about the new update to Google Docs Sheet slides that let you automatically save recent files.
Yeah,
offline.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Great show today.
Yeah, man.
As usual. It's like I said, into school in Arkansas. Today is the last day of school in Arkansas.
Yeah.
So this is the Arkansas Last Day of School show. So now, interestingly enough, David and I are year-round workers. We're tech guys, so we will not get the summer off.
Yeah, it's not really our last day. And the funny thing is, for a lot of educators in the state, it's not actually their last day either, because a lot of districts have filled out the last 2 days of the week, Thursday and Friday, with professional development days. So the kids are out.
The kids are
home.
So it's no more students, no more looks, no more slash tires with dirty hooks. I don't know. So the kids are all gone.
I'm going to need a 10-second delay.
How'd you know that was a poet? I didn't know I was a poet, and I didn't know it. Hey, listen, thanks for listening to the show. And we always get a little crazy at this time because we get to go home here in a bit. That's what makes it all okay eventually, I think. Doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, listen. Crazy.
Thanks for listening today. I'm Jeff Madlock.
I'm David Henderson.
We'll see you next time.
See ya. You've been listening to EduTechGuys Radio, radio.edutechguys.com.
The opinions expressed on this site and its programs are those of participants and not intended to and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any specific educational entity, sponsor, company, state, or government agency.